No one in town wanted the ranch. Not even for free. When the offer first came up, people laughed, thinking it was a joke. Then when they realized it wasn't, they laughed even harder before quietly stepping away. The place had a history, and not the kind anyone wanted to carry. It sat on the edge of town, far enough to feel forgotten, but close enough that everyone knew its name. Black Hollow Ranch, a place where things had gone wrong years ago and never quite settled back to normal. The land was dry, the house broken windows staring out like empty eyes, and the barn half collapsed as if it had simply given up. But what kept people away wasn't just how it looked, it was what people said about it. Lights at night, footsteps where no one should be, whispers carried by the wind, stories that grew darker each time they were told, until finally the owner gave up trying to sell it the normal way and put it up for auction, with a starting price so low it felt like a dare. $1. That's all it took to own the place. Most people stayed far away from the auction. Some came just to watch, shaking their heads and placing quiet bets on who would be foolish enough to take it. No one expected Lucas Reed to be the one to raise his hand. He stood near the back, calm and still, while the auctioneer repeated the price again, as if giving the crowd one last chance to stop him. $1. Do I hear more? Silence. A few murmurs, some laughter. Then Lucas spoke, his voice even. I'll take it. Heads turned immediately. The room shifted attention, snapping toward him. People whispered his name low and uncertain. Lucas Reed. The man who had come to town only months ago kept to himself, worked hard, said little. He wasn't known for making careless decisions, and yet here he was. The auctioneer blinked once, surprised but not about to argue. Sold! The gavel hit wood, and just like that, the ranch changed hands. For a single dollar. Lucas didn't stay to hear the comments or the warnings that followed him as he stepped outside. He had already made up his mind. This wasn't about the stories. This wasn't about what people thought. It was land, and land could be fixed. What he didn't know was that the stories weren't entirely wrong. The ride out to Black Hollow Ranch took longer than expected, the path rough and barely used. The closer he got, the quieter it became. No birds, no movement, just the sound of his horse and the wind brushing over dry ground. When the ranch finally came into view, it looked worse than he had imagined. The house leaned slightly to one side, the porch broken in places, the roof sagging just enough to make it clear no one had cared for it in years. He dismounted slowly, tying the horse to a nearby post that looked like it might still hold, before stepping toward the house. His boots creaked against the old wood of the porch as he approached the door. He paused for a moment, his hand resting lightly on the handle, listening. Nothing, just silence. He pushed the door open. The hinges groaned loudly, the sound echoing through the empty space inside. Dust hung in the air, disturbed by the movement. Light filtered through broken windows, casting thin beams across the floor. The place smelled old, untouched, but not entirely abandoned. There was something else there, something faint but noticeable. Lucas stepped inside, his gaze moving carefully over the room. The furniture was sparse, most of it broken or missing, but not everything. A chair sat upright near the corner. A blanket lay folded roughly on a bench. Not clean, not new, but not forgotten either. His eyes narrowed slightly. This wasn't just an empty ranch. He moved deeper into the house, his steps slow, deliberate, every sense alert. The floor creaked under his weight, the sound carrying further than it should have. He stopped when he heard something. A faint shift. Not the wind, not the house settling, something else. He turned his head slightly, listening again. There, a small sound coming from deeper inside. Movement. He didn't reach for his weapon, not yet. Instead, he stepped forward, following the sound down a narrow hallway. The light dimmer here, the air cooler. The door at the end was slightly open. He pushed it gently, the wood scraping softly against the floor as it moved. The room beyond was small, almost bare except for one thing. A figure, curled near the far wall, still as stone. For a second he thought it was just more forgotten clutter. Then it moved. His body tensed instantly, his focus sharpening as the figure shifted slowly, revealing itself. A girl, young, thin, her clothes worn and dirty, her hair tangled, but her eyes, sharp, alert. She didn't speak. She didn't mention into them, but her vault had moved in someone's self. She didn't speak anything his best that leased her room. She didn't match it notice in the wood. He started her figure, almost about known. She just stared at him like she was trying to decide if he was real. Lucas didn't move any closer, keeping his distance, his voice steady. "This your place?" The question hung in the air. The girl blinked once, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she shook her head. No. He glanced around the room again, then back at her. "You alone?" A pause, then a small nod. "Yes." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with questions neither of them asked. She pulled her knees slightly closer to her chest, her gaze never leaving him, like she expected him to disappear, or worse, to become something else. Lucas studied her for a moment longer, taking in the details, the way she held herself, the way she watched everything. He had seen that kind of look before. Not fear, not exactly. Survival. He stepped back slightly, giving her space. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said simply. She didn't respond, but she didn't move away either. That was something. He glanced toward the door, then back at her. "You got a name?" Another pause. Then quietly, almost too soft to hear, "Mara." He nodded once. "Lucas." The introduction felt strange in a place like this, but necessary. The air shifted slightly, tension easing just enough to breathe. He moved to the side, picking up the folded blanket from the other room, bringing it back and setting it down a few feet from her. Not too close, not too far. She looked at it, then at him again, confusion flickering briefly across her face. He didn't explain. He didn't push. He just stood there for a moment longer before turning away, giving her the choice, not forcing it. His mind was already working through what this meant. A ranch no one wanted, a girl living alone inside it, and a story the town had only half understood. Because this place wasn't empty. It never had been. And as Lucas stepped back into the main room, the weight of that truth settled in fully. This wasn't just land to fix. This was something else, something deeper, something that had been left behind and forgotten. Until now. And as the quiet returned around them both, one thing became clear, without either of them saying it out loud. This was only the beginning. The silence settled back into the ranch, but it no longer felt empty. It felt watched. Alive in a way Lucas hadn't expected. He stood in the main room for a moment longer, his eyes moving slowly across the broken walls, the dust, the faint signs that someone had been here longer than anyone in town realized. His gaze shifted toward the hallway again, toward the room where the girl waited. He didn't rush back. He didn't want to startle her or push her into fear. She clearly knew too well. Instead, he moved calmly, checking the rest of the house first. The kitchen showed signs of use, a tin cup set near the edge of the counter, a small pile of dried scraps carefully wrapped. Not much, but enough to survive. The back door had been reinforced from the inside, wood nailed across it in uneven lines. A child wouldn't do that without reason. Lucas stepped outside briefly, circling the house, his eyes scanning the land. The ranch stretched wide and quiet, but something about the ground caught his attention. Tracks. Not fresh, but not old either. Multiple sets, some larger, some careless. Men had been here, and not long ago. His jaw tightened slightly. He looked back at the house, then toward the hills in the distance, calculating. He wasn't alone out here. Not truly. He stepped back inside, closing the door behind him with a quiet firmness. When he returned to the hallway, he slowed his steps, making sure she heard him coming. He didn't want to appear suddenly. The door remained open just enough for him to see her. She hadn't moved much, still near the wall, but her posture had shifted slightly, less rigid, more aware of him than afraid. He stopped a few feet from the doorway. "You been here long?" he asked. She hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the blanket before answering. "I don't know." Her voice was still soft, but steadier than before. He nodded once, accepting that answer for what it was. He leaned lightly against the frame, not stepping inside, not closing the space between them. "Anyone else come here?" A pause. Her eyes dropped briefly, then lifted again. "Sometimes." That was enough. His expression didn't change, but his mind sharpened further. "They come for the ranch?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "They look for things." "What things?" Another pause, longer this time, like she was deciding how much to say. Then quietly, "Something hidden." Lucas studied her for a moment longer. Then he stepped back from the doorway, giving her more room. "You eaten?" She blinked once, caught off guard by the shift, then gave a small, uncertain nod. He didn't push it. He moved to the kitchen instead, gathering what little he had brought with him: bread, dried meat, water. Not much, but better than what she had. He set it down on the table without calling her. Then he waited. It took time. Slow, careful time. But eventually she stepped into the doorway, watching him before taking a few quiet steps forward. Her movements were cautious, like she expected the ground itself to change beneath her. She stopped near the table, her eyes moving from the food to him. He didn't speak. He just gave a small nod. She reached for the bread first, her hands still unsure, but quick once she started eating. Not greedy, not desperate, just careful. He watched without making it obvious, noticing the way she kept glancing toward the windows, the door, the corners of the room. Always aware, always listening. When she finished, she stepped back again, not running, just returning to a distance that felt safe for her. "You don't have to stay in that room," he said after a moment. She looked at him, unsure. "This place," he continued, glancing around briefly, "it's not empty, but it's not theirs either." Her expression shifted slightly at that. Not fear, not quite. Hope maybe, but small, guarded. He added quietly, "Not anymore." The words settled between them heavier than they sounded. She didn't respond, but something in her posture eased just a little more. The light outside began to fade, evening settling in again. Lucas moved to fix what he could quickly, reinforcing the front door, checking the windows, his movements efficient, impracticed. He worked like a man who had done this before, preparing for something he didn't fully see yet, but knew was coming. Mara watched from a distance, her eyes following him quietly. After a while, she spoke again. "You're not leaving." It wasn't a question. He glanced at her, then back at his work. "No." Another pause, then softer. "Why?" He stopped for a second, considering the simplest answer. "Because someone should have stayed a long time ago." She didn't reply, but she didn't look away either. Night came faster out there, the darkness deeper without the noise of town to break it. The ranch settled into quiet again, but this time it felt different, like something was waiting. Lucas sat near the table, his back to the wall, his eyes on the door. He didn't sleep, not fully. Mara stayed close to the hallway, watching from the shadows, not hiding, but not stepping fully into the open either. Hours passed. Then it came. The sound. A horse. Distant at first, then closer. Hoofbeats cutting through the silence, sharp and unmistakable. Mara stiffened instantly, her body going still. Lucas was already on his feet, his hand resting near his gun, his gaze fixed on the door. The horse stopped outside, A moment of silence, then another, then voices. Low, rough. One of them stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking under his weight. A knock followed, not polite, not patient, just enough to make it clear they weren't asking. "We know someone's in there," the voice carried easily through the wood. Mara's breathing quickened, but she didn't move. Lucas remained still, his stance calm but ready. "Place ain't yours to keep," the voice continued. "You open that door, we'll make this easy." Lucas didn't answer. Not yet. He glanced once toward Mara. She was watching him, not the door. Him, waiting. He looked back at the door, his expression hardening just slightly. "It's mine now," he said evenly. The silence outside shifted. Not gone, but different. A quiet kind of tension. "Then you bought more than land," the man replied with a low edge to his tone. "You bought trouble." Lucas's grip steadied. "Then I'll deal with it." Another pause, longer this time. He could feel it building, the moment before something breaks. Then footsteps, the sound of someone stepping back. A signal. The night seemed to hold its breath. And in that stillness, Lucas made his choice fully, not just to stay, not just to protect the land, but to protect the girl who had been left behind in it. The ranch had a past, that much was clear. But whatever it was, whatever these men were searching for, it wasn't going to take her with it. And as the first movement outside shifted toward action, and the quiet turned sharp with danger, one truth settled deep and unshaken in his mind. He hadn't just bought an abandoned ranch for $1. He had stepped into a fight that was never really over. And this time, he wasn't walking away.